I'm excited to share MHIS recently launched another renal denervation study. So Radiance 2 is now open for enrollment. The study design is to assess the therapeutic benefits of catheter-directed renal denervation in managing essential and resistant hypertension patients. The purpose of the study is for effectiveness and safety of the Paradise system for subjects with stage 2 hypertension on 0 to 2 medication at time of consent. And we're looking for patients age 18 to 75 at the time of consent, history of treated with antihypertensive medication, uncontrollable blood pressure at screening time. And patients also must be eligible with renal denervation documented by MRA and CTA and confirmed by renal angiography at the time of the procedure. And if you have any questions, Dr. Wong, Rose Peterson, and I will be available. We're looking forward for all of the referrals. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out on yet another cold morning. We are very thrilled today to welcome Dr. Janice Collins from the University of Michigan. She is a minimally invasive bariatric surgeon. Her clinical practice is devoted to innovative, advanced, minimally invasive therapies focused on hernia treatment, benign diseases of the esophagus, and morbid obesity. But more pertinent to our talk this morning, her academic interests lie in health services research with focus on implementation science, the dissemination of evidence-based recommendations into practice. She completed her surgical training at the Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York and her fellowship in minimally invasive bariatric surgery at MGH. She also completed a master's in public health in the Executive Masters of Healthcare Management program at the Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health. And we're very honored to have her present today on the topic of unconscious bias and its impact on healthcare culture and delivery. Thank you, Dr. Collins.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here today, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic. These are my disclosures. They should not impact my talk today, but I have a couple disclaimers. And the first one is that this might be uncomfortable, and that's okay. It's okay to look at this and say, this is weird, or I don't know that this applies to us, or we don't have this problem here. What I just ask is that everybody kind of keeps an open mind about this talk and just approaches it with kind of that growth mindset. I work on this daily. I'm not perfect. I'm not up here giving you this talk because I figured it out. I just happen to study it. But this is something that I work on every single day. And also I'm a surgeon, which means that I might not know some of the things that are unique to your culture and to your field, so forgive me for that ahead of time. And I might say things that may be relevant or may not be relevant, but you can only kind of present from the experiences that you've had. So I want to start the talk with this sort of riddle. And I want everybody just to take a moment and to read this and see if they can figure it out. You can raise your hand when you're done reading it, because I never give people enough time. It's the surgeon and me. I'm always like, all right, let's go. All right, so did anybody get this? Have people seen this before? So obvious, right? Maybe you didn't. So it's the boy's mom. Did you get it? And if you didn't, you don't have to raise your hand. It's okay. How long did it take you? And so half of people have a problem solving this. And I don't bring this up to like make this about the riddle. I bring this up for two reasons. One, I love that the universal example for unconscious bias is surgery, so that's on us. And two, to poke a little bit of fun at myself. When I started researching this topic, I came upon this riddle. This before I'd been exposed to it, and I read it. And I read it, and I read it again, and I couldn't get it. And finally, I'm like, come on, Dana, this can't be that hard. You're studying unconscious bias. This is obviously they're trying to trick you. And I thought about it even more, and I'm like, I get it. It's 2018. The boy has two fathers, right? I totally get it. And so then I realized, after I saw the answer, that I'm biased against myself. And so then that launched kind of this whole talk and this whole reason why I'm interested in it, because I could not, even though I'm a female surgeon, bring myself to think possibly that the woman was a surgeon in this riddle. Which brings me to my next point, which is we are all unconscious and we are all a bit biased. And that's okay. It's how we function. And that's why I'm here today. Why I'm here today is to sort of increase awareness, which eventually will change behavior and eventually improve culture, because culture is king. So when we think about the evolution of the human brain and why this happens, it's because we weren't born as complex as we are. Early person was born to survive, right? We had three things we had to do. Eat, run, and it says hit, but, get our food source and food supply. We didn't have time when we saw something like this to think to ourselves, is it a friendly alligator? Does it want to hang out? Is it going to be my friend? Are we going to take long walks through the Amazon together? No. We had to figure out, seeing this image very quickly, that fight or flight, dangerous, not dangerous. Can I be near here or can I not be near itself? And so when you think about that early primitive brain, we are designed to receive millions and millions of bits of information all of the time, but we can't consciously process all of it. So we spend about 99% of our time unconscious. And if you think about that, think about leaving your house today. Could you imagine if you had to think about every single step it took you to get here this morning from the minute that you woke up? Okay, I have to open my eyes. I have to put one foot out of my bed. Now the second foot. I have to get up. I have to walk to the bathroom. I have to brush my teeth. And even into minute details. So we have to do these things unconsciously or we can't move forward. And because of this, we're wired to see patterns. And these patterns are shaped by our past experiences, good and bad, the exposures that we've had. And shortcuts can lead to misinterpretation, right? That same feeling you get at night, see someone on the opposite side of the street, that you get that weird feeling in your stomach, maybe I should cross. Maybe that person isn't good or bad, but you can't figure it out in that moment, and the safe thing to do is cross. And maybe that's okay, but sometimes it's not okay. So I want you to look at this picture. What's your honest gut reaction? You don't have to say it out loud. Just be honest with yourself. What do you think when you see this picture? How about now? Different? Same person. Same exact person. How about now? What about now? Do you believe it? Would anybody be like, oh, she's a neurosurgeon? Seeing that picture? Just challenge yourself a little bit and think about that. So we recognize these gender, social, and other characteristics, and we judge people instantaneously. Are they like us? Do they belong to our group? Are they safe? Or are they not? And if they're not, we may push them away or not bring them as close. Again, not because we're bad people, not because we're inherently biased, not because we're racist or misogynistic or don't like women or don't like Hispanic people, but because there's just an innate ability to bring people who are close to you closer because it's safe and it's what you recognize as safe. The problem is it has impact. And when you ask, what is the impact of this unconscious bias, let's start with opportunity, even getting your foot in the door. There was a really cool study that looked at resumes, identical resumes that were assigned either a very European or an African-American name. And they sent these identical resumes out. And what they saw was it took 50% more applications if your name was Tamika, Aisha, Rashid, or Tyrone to get a call back than if it was Brendan, Greg, Emily, or Ann. And there was nothing different on those resumes. What about for men and women? This was a study looking at lab manager positions. They sent identical resumes again to women and men, not just men, looking for a lab position. The only difference on those resumes was the name on the top of the resume, a male name versus a female name. And what they found was, by both men and women, that the male applicants were rated more competent, more hireable, more suitable for mentoring, and offered them higher salaries by $3,500. The only thing different on that resume was the name. So you have to kind of wonder where these associations are coming from. And then there's another study that looks at the gender paradox of parental status. Again, sent identical resumes out. But on the resume, they put something on there. They put something on indicating parental status, president of the PTA, or organized with, whatever children's activity it is. And what they found was on identical resumes that moms were rated less competent and less committed, and less likely to be recommended for higher promotion and management, and with lower starting salaries versus dads who were rated as more committed and offered higher starting salaries than non-fathers themselves. So something's clearly going on here. And when you talk about opportunity, let's move to advancement. How about moving up in the world? So this was really a study that looked at 268 male managers who were asked to use 92 attributes to describe men, to describe women in general. So just what do you think of when you think of a man, and what do you think of when you think of a woman? Men and women as managers, and men and women as successful managers. And what they found was that 71% of the traits associated with a successful manager were associated with the traits that were listed for men in general. So there's already this language bias, or this kind of concept in the back of all of our minds of what success looks like. And so this can have a cumulative impact over time, because even the smallest amount of bias, as unintentional as it is, can have really big consequences. This was a computer simulation of the hierarchy for promotion, and it was evenly split between men and women. And men and women were assigned random performance scores, and they give men a 1-point competitive advantage. So men were 101, women were 100. And what they saw is that after 20 simulations of what this would look at with a 1% edge, only 35% of level 8 employees, so the highest level, would be blue. That 1% edge over time really created a big distribution between leadership potential or positioning. And you ask yourself, does this look familiar? And so what I'm showing you right now is the AAMC data comparing 5-year trends for women for academic advancement. And I want you to look over here at the department chair and dean position. And so what this data are, it's not just male-dominated specialties. This is including everything from pediatrics, gynecology, surgery, every specialty. You can see that only about 20% of department chairs and deans are women, and it's not changing over time. So there used to be this argument, oh, it's just a pipeline problem. If we wait long enough, things are going to catch up. But they're not catching, and things are pretty much the same. And so to talk about this pipeline project, this is where I'm going to put my surgeon hat on again, because this is what I know. And so a lot of times people in surgery will say, okay, just wait, you're going to catch up. We don't have a pipeline problem in surgery. Nearly half of the complement in surgery have been women for the last 10 to 15 years. And so if we were going to catch up, we would have expected to see this by now. But when we look at the trends in this over time, what we see is that if we keep going at the current rate that we're going to go, it's going to take over 100 years to get gender parity between men and women at the higher ranks. So you have to say there's something else going on, because I can't think that half of the people entering surgery are less competent than the other half of the people going in. And so the question is what are the drivers that propagate this inequity? And when we think about this gender inequity, and at least what's going on in surgery, there's a whole bunch of things going into this that are likely driving what we're seeing. So one of the things is academics. If you want to get promoted, you have to get grants. That's one of the things that you have to do. But when you go in and you look at the NIH funding, what we see is that women are less likely to receive funding, and this is perpetuated for underrepresented minorities, both male and female. And there's a decreased percent of funding dollars as compared to men. And when you go and look at this, and we'll talk about it for a second, and they've gone and they've looked at the summary statements and the summary sheets that women get back, a lot of times when you're trying to get that first career development, that there's gendered language in there. Men are discussed as having being superstars and that they're going to go off to have careers, whereas women are discussed as being communal and being able to build a community and being able to build a community of researchers. Who are you going to fund? The person who's going to go off to be a superstar, or the person who's going to go and build a community? So we bias in that language, not intentionally, but it has those consequences. And I can tell you for myself, we thought for fun, we'll put in an R01 kind of on this topic to start thinking about this. And similar to what we see kind of across the country right now, reviewer 1 was very good, gave it 1s and 2s and 3s, and had very interesting critiques, mainly being we should include men in this because underrepresented minority men have similar problems. And I said, you know what, you're 100% right. Reviewer 2 loved it, and reviewer 3 hated it. And basically this was what they wrote on my summary statement very publicly, that says many institutions now have recruitment targets that place women and minorities in a favorable position for recruitment and promotion. As more and more women enter the field of surgery, the opportunities for advancement are growing. Now, I hope I've set this up to show you that that is not true and that's not the case, but this was the belief system, and thankfully it sounded like the people in the room didn't believe that person, so I guess we made our case well enough that it scored pretty well and from the bubble for funding. But this was on a public summary statement where basically someone's like, this is not a problem because we're giving jobs to women in work. That's what that says. And that is not true. And so there's also this concept of general expectations. Forgive the Lego people. I think they're kind of cute, and we'll get back to them in a little. But when we go to work, men are expected to be assertive, independent, ambitious, self-confident, and exhibit traits of aggression. Women are expected to be caring, warm, compassionate, nurturing, sensitive, and communal. And there are consequences for violating these gender roles, right? If I go in and I'm aggressive, no one is celebrating that at work. I can tell you that much. It is not happening. And even I can tell you personally, have modified behaviors. You know, you do things, you ask people twice, you say please and thank you, you kind of shirk back because God forbid you're perceived as being assertive or aggressive because that takes you off the leadership track and it puts you in the HR track, and no one wants to be in the HR track because that's a bad track to be on. But every day you worry about your behavior. Does anybody worry about their behavior every day when they show up at work and how people are going to perceive them? Every day I think about this. I talk to my male colleagues. They're like, what? We just come to work. I'm like, no, you have to watch everything you do, everything you say, every interaction that you have. You know, you constantly worry about this. And so this also perpetuates the salary gap. And if you look at the 10 occupations with the worst wage gap, physicians and surgeons have about, you know, a huge gap between what we earn. And this leads to people feeling undervalued. And when you feel undervalued, it affects your performance and it affects your ability and desire to be at work. And finally, gender and leadership. And this is the hardest thing to kind of explain and describe. When I walk into the room, nobody naturally looks at me as a leader. And they have data to show this. When you're a woman and you go to the head of the table, no one automatically turns to you and says, this is the person leading the council, this is the leader. You have to earn that. You have to walk in and go through iterative processes to find to do that. However, when they've done studies, they look that if a man sits at the head of the table, automatically people turn and assume that that person is leading the meeting. And I think this happens to everybody in this room. If I go and see a patient in the office or something, I'll be with one of my medical students who's, you know, a tall white male. The patient automatically looks to them. I'm like, I'm right here. I'm your doctor. I did your surgery. But I don't get that benefit right away. Nobody looks at me right away because I'm short, I'm young looking, you know, and whatever it is. And they look at my medical students, or they look at the TA. At Michigan, it was interesting. We were having a problem where patients were leaving the emergency department and saying a physician never saw them. They were being seen by a physician. It just happened to be a woman, and they didn't attribute that that was the woman. So now they have to wear these, like, big badges that say attending physician and be like, I am your physician, and I am seeing you now, because people thought that, oh, this is the advanced practice provider or the nurse or whomever's coming to see me, but no one's actually addressing their problem. And performance reviews. There's a lot of loaded language in performance reviews, and this is a cautionary tale of being careful what you write about people, and they've shown this for medical students and for fellowships, that the recommendations that are written for men and women are very different. We've seen a lot of recommendations for women coming through, talking about how they look, how their appearance, how they smile. Does that matter? Does that matter to the competency or to where they are? Assertive, aggressive, you know, and all those things. And so we really have to be careful about the language that's used to describe people. An opportunity. There's a lot of differential mentorship and sponsorship. Women do not get mentored and sponsored in the same way as men. There's also now a backlash of mentorship and Me Too movement. I don't know if anybody saw the Journal of Medicine article, but there's a slew of men who are now saying they're afraid to mentor women. And my response to that is, well, if you're not doing anything bad, you probably shouldn't be afraid to mentor women. Nothing's going to happen. Women are kind of going around looking to say, you know, can people be falsely accused? Of course, nothing is never. But for the most part, it is. And we can find also different ways to mentor. So if those days of taking somebody out for a drink, maybe we do coffee instead so you don't end up in this position. I put this slide up here because one thing looks very different than the rest. To sort of poke fun at myself. We did a 5-society bile duct injury prevention conference. This was a really big deal and something that we'd worked really hard on. So there is this person here in my front. He's been a phenomenal mentor and sponsor for me. He's at WashU, even though we've never worked together. He's been just a tremendous force in terms of my life and my career advancement in the clinical space. And it was his decision when he was the president of one of our societies that we were going to tackle this injury of bile duct injury after gallbladder surgery, which is a very morbid condition and leads to a lot of downstream problems. So we decided that we're going to do this 5-society conference where we're going to include all of the GI societies and hepatobiliary societies to really come together and come to consensus about what can be done to address this problem. So from our society, because I'm involved and decided as a society it's going to be a priority for us to be a diverse society, and we'll talk about that in a second, we sent me, Dr. Rudd, Dan DeZiel, and then Mary Crandall up here. So 2 women and 3 men. But we didn't put any guardrails on anybody else. We're like, just send whomever your stars are from your society. This is what we got. Okay? And you mean to tell me, I know some phenomenal hepatobiliary women surgeons who would have killed this and done so great. But everybody brought their friends. And the interesting thing is that this isn't random. If you see Keith Lormo, who's the chair of surgery at MGH, he brought a couple of his fellows, and so everybody brought their friends, right? Not a bad thing. Everybody here is a superstar. But what about that opportunity for mentorship, for sponsorship, for visibility, for all the women who aren't in this picture, who are already having a tough time in hepatobiliary surgery? So while this conference was a huge clinical success, I looked at it as a personal failure because we didn't do more to make sure that we were equally representing everybody. And so at the end of the day, the end result is that these accumulation of small advantages and disadvantages, our biases and valuations and outcomes, lead to big problems. And I love this quote, which is mountains are molehills piled on top of one another. So let's go back to our Lego people. And this is kind of the way that it happens, and it's kind of an academic example just to kind of take it out of the framework of being personal. So they both start as assistant professors at their University of Professional Dreams. He's assigned to small courses in his specialty. She's assigned to introductory level and required core courses, bigger classrooms, bigger loads. Scholarship wins award, department does a huge reception. She wins an award, and it's announced to be a female. He's appointed to departmental executive committee, and she's appointed to many, many committees, lots of service committees, lots of things that aren't high profile. It tends to happen to many women who start. They keep continuing, both are excelling in publishing and teaching. He's aggressive at faculty meetings, and his colleagues appreciate his honesty and think he's great. She's aggressive, and colleagues start questioning her emotions. Is she a little bit unstable? What's going on there? I see the women here laughing because it's true. He mentors a few grad students. She's asked to mentor female graduate students, and this is a pet peeve of mine. Women always get asked to mentor other women. I don't know basic science, and you send me a basic science mentee, I'm not going to do anything helpful for their career, but this happens all the time, and it happens for underrepresented minorities also, where you're expected to be kind of a flag bearer. His partner's having a baby, she's having a baby, and then years later, they're successfully promoted to full professors, and while they achieve equal rank, they don't have equal standing, because he's more visible, he has more kind of clout to him in his accomplishments, whereas she kind of has all this red bags, the pregnancy, the aggressive behavior, all those things that are celebrated in one aren't in another. And so you can see that while you can achieve, you may not be equal in your standing and your ability to help promote, which is the importance of mentorship and sponsorship of mixed and non-supportive genders. So the question is why does this matter? I spent a lot of time talking about its impact, but why does this matter? Is it just because it's the right thing to do? And I want to take this out of the social justice argument of, oh, this is the right thing to do. While it is the right thing to do, it's not the only reason to do it. This is a phenomenal book, and anybody hasn't read it, by Scott Page, called The Diversity Bone. And what he's shown mathematically is that diverse teams increase workplace innovation, outperform competitors, and improve complex problem solving, right? And every day we come to work, there's a lot of complex problems. I'll give an example. Who remembers Kodak? Who had a Kodak camera? Everybody did, right? Kodak was the king of what? Film, paper film. And so Kodak's CEO was like, film is going to last forever. This is our model. This is our success. And they suffered from something called groupthink, where everybody thought this person was a genius. And of course, film's going to last forever. One person said, you know, I hear like this digital stuff coming on, and people want digital cameras and things like that. I said, no, we do film, and this is what we're going to do. Where's Kodak today? Right? So if you don't look like what your clients look, your patients look, or what the young people look out there, you will be marginalized at best, and at worst, obliterated. Because there's no way to know what people want if you don't have that diverse representation on your boards and your policies. And we see that impact in healthcare delivery, on patient outcomes. Everybody saw sort of those articles of bringing in, practicing medicine, and whether or not you believe it, certainly there's non-inferiority there. We also know that concordant races, people are more likely to use healthcare. So there's a lot of distrust of healthcare in underrepresented minority communities. And when they come to a hospital and they see people who look like them, it's a lot more comforting. There's also the ability to have cultural competency. If you don't have people that look different and represent your patients, it's hard to have cultural competency, and cultural competency impacts healthcare. So we have to think about it in that way. And then healthcare policy. If you don't look like or understand the people whom you're making policy for, it's very likely there's going to be a mismatch in the policy and what people need to do. Think about doing any type of clinical innovation in your process. Let's say you want to change your workflow of how patients come in and access the clinic. You can make decisions here at the 30,000-foot view. But if you don't include those people who are at the front desk manning the station, those things will fall flat. Any reorg will fall flat. Because if you don't have the people who have their boots on the ground who are actually privy to what those flows mean and how that can work, you can have all of the best ideas in the world, and none of them are going to go through because they don't have that practicality for implementation. So now that we understand it, how do we fix it? I think the first thing to do is identifying that we have unconscious bias. And again, it's okay. It's normal, and that it doesn't make anybody a bad person. We just have lived experiences that color and change the way that we see the world. But I think that we have to identify the triggers that bring it out of us in maybe a worse way. The first one is attack, when we associate certain jobs with a certain type of person. And this can have a lot to do with gendered languages, associating surgeon with a male or nurse with a female. They're just things we grew up with. And I think it's hard to break those associations, but we just have to be cognizant of those associations. Also, numbers are more likely to use bias to analyze people and outlying demographics when we look at large groups. When we're processing large amount of information and we're seeing big groups of people and it can be overwhelming, it's more natural to revert back to that initial time frame of, okay, like, not like, and bring people in where other people may seem off-putting. Also, clarity. When information is lacking, our brains fill in the gaps of what we're expecting. Does anybody do this? Jump to conclusions right away, kind of look at somebody and assume something? We have to take a step back, and we have to think about this. Is this really what's going on, or is this just what we're seeing? And also the perceiver, when we're in heightened emotional state, we can have our conscious mind distracted. When we're angry or really, really tired, is anybody a little irritable when they're tired? Not as patient, not as willing to hear people out or do stuff with me. We might not be able to do that. So really it's about mindfulness, communication, and stepping out of your comfort zone. And part of that is just showing up here today and listening to this with an open mind, whether you believe this or not. I think it's just great that you even showed up to listen to it. And so when we think about improvements, like anything we do in science, should be specific. They should be measurable. We should think about subtle messaging, and are we messaging what we want correctly? And there has to be accountability. So specific, strict definition. What does success in your organization look like specifically? Defining clear criteria for promotion, transparency, and that can do with how compensation is done, strict job or committee definitions and what it takes to get onto those committees, and structured interviews upon agreed-upon metrics, and I'll get to that in a second. Subtle messaging. How are you messaging yourself as an organization? What is the language that you're using? I mean, you can see on this thing, I think a lot of people have been asked, what, you're not married yet, you don't have kids yet, you speak English really well from not being here. Where have you come from? This person's great for a Hispanic doctor or for a black doctor. Why is there any difference? But we're taught, and we use these kind of qualifiers in our language, and while sometimes they don't seem like a big deal, they can be a big deal because they set up that disparity. So consider how you present yourself. Consider how the organization presents itself. With websites, social media, speakers, and representatives that are coming here. We had this huge launch to be diverse as an organization, and the first thing we did for our laparoscopy organization is stuck something on with like 4 white male surgeons on the cover of our website. I'm like, come on, guys, you're doing this like whole thing for diversity, and you're slapping up 4 white surgeons. I'm like, we can't do this. So again, even when you're in it and you're in the throes, you have to think about it and make sure that what you're showing the world, even if it's not what you've attained yet, is kind of what's the best self that you want to be. And accountability. Everyone is accountable. You have to question your first impression. If you meet someone and you don't like them, and that happens, you don't like everybody, and you don't have to like everybody, and that's okay. But question, why don't I like this person? Do I not like them because there's actually something, or do I not like them because they're different and it's scary and there's something about them that I don't understand? And justify that. Ask for and be receptive to feedback. This is a big thing. We always say feedback is a gift. Sometimes it hurts, but it's always a gift. And empower everyone around you to call out bias. So this comes down from the top. And if you're not in a culture where you feel comfortable speaking up, speaking out, none of this can get fixed. And so now I just kind of want to switch back to Michigan for a second and talk about some of the things that we're doing locally. We are not perfect. We still have a lot of ways to go, but we're trying. And some of the things are getting much better, and we're doing kind of iterative advancements as we go through. So we came up with something as the Department of Surgery as the landscape of medicine is changing. Michigan used to be a very cookie-cutter place that has very one phenotype for success. You come in, you do your clinical work, you're an R01-funded basic science researcher, you do X, Y, and Z, and that was a promotion track. But that's not the way of the world anymore. And there are so many different phenotypes of surgeon now. We have our clinicians, we have people interested in global surgery, we have our health service researchers, we have people who are interested in network development and community practice. So you can't apply a single cookie-cutter model to everybody. So you'll see these 4 people, including myself and Dr. Tim, we'll talk about a little bit later. That's our chair of surgery, Dr. Janice Collins, Dr. Janice, who is a plastic surgeon, Dr. Eric Newman, a pediatric surgeon, Dr. Leslie Gossett, who's a surgeon oncologist, came together with the entire department of feedback and created something called Michigan Promise. And this was really meant to advance surgeon excellence and to mentor and sponsor surgeons of all phenotypes. You can see the different branches. I'm not going to talk about all of them today, but they really combine the core missions of what we felt we wanted to be and where we wanted to go as a department. We are not there, but we are trying. So let's talk about recruitment. We have changed the way that we recruit faculty. It used to be that we recruited faculty the same way everybody recruits the faculty. A fellow coming out, somebody picks up the phone, they call the chair, they say this person's great, the person comes. What do you think happens when you do that? You get a lot of people that are exactly the same, right? Same pedigree, same training, same interests, because that's like you get played. So we said that's not okay. We have to figure something out. So we started following the Rooney Rule. Does anybody know what the Rooney Rule is? From Pittsburgh? Okay. So there was an NFL coach. Actually, it was, I'm going to get this all wrong, so I would get the sports wrong. But anyway, he was an owner of the team, and what they saw was that the NFL had a lot of issues in terms of very homogenous with the NFL coaches. And what they said was, okay, what we're going to do is there's a lot of talented African American and minority people who have these coaching jobs. We're going to make a rule that says we cannot move forward to hire unless we interview, not hire, interview one African American with one, white physician. And we did that, and they kind of transformed it. And now you see a lot of African American coaches in the NFL. And when they look at the data that are coming from that, they're showing that they have really great winning streaks and getting to playoffs and getting to Super Bowls. And it's just because people are being overlooked because of cronyism, because of friends and how people are brought in. So we started employing that. So at the University of Michigan now, we cannot move forward with any hire until we interview an underrepresented minority and women and anybody else who wants to come. And when you come, this is what you see. You come and you sit at a round table interview. At this table, and I'm part of this group, and it's amazing, you have 12 to 15 surgeons that are of different races, different genders, different specialties, and we all ask the same questions. And some of those questions are behavior-based questions. And we all hear the same answers. And then we all talk about what we thought from our lens, and we create a summary statement for each of the candidates that come through and sort of rank them accordingly. This has been so impactful and powerful, and we've recruited so many diverse and interesting faculty that likely never would have come through our door before or have been interested in coming to our university. This has been so impactful that we're in the middle of a chair search right now, that they've asked us to do this as part of the chair search and present those summaries to the dean's office as part of consideration for our next chair. And this has been a phenomenal effort. Environment. We've been very strategic about our environment. One of the things we've done is had targeted what we call diversity grand rounds, where we've brought in speakers to talk about different disciplines, similar to today, a couple times a year. And then we also formed the Michigan Women's Surgical Collaborative, which is part of our rigorous academic study of why the gender gap exists. And it's really meant to promote and support women at all levels across the university and disseminate that nationally. We've had 2 conferences so far. They've been super well attended and well received. This year, however, because one of the feedback that we got was that a lot of these efforts to promote women are making men feel marginalized. And the last thing that you want to do when you're trying to promote diversity is to marginalize people. So the question is, how can we all do this together and take it out of the realm of women versus not women, Hispanic versus not Hispanic, and say, let's do this all together. So this year, as part of the conference, we had a he for she, which we've now called we for we, to talk about these issues in an open and transparent way, and to figure out how can we all work together to give everybody what they need and create our community and culture without marginalizing people. And this was, I think, a tremendous success, and so much so we're going to make it a full day next year of the conference. And finally, we can use our collective skills for culture change. So when I look at this, this is how I do my research. This is my research map, and I live in the middle here with implementation science. So implementation science is kind of this concept of who needs to do what differently. And what it is, it's bridging a practice gap. So there are things that we know we should be doing, best practices, and the things that we're actually doing, which sometimes and a lot of times aren't best practices. Think of hand washing, right? Best practice, wash your hands. But what do we know? Does everybody wash their hands? No, it's kind of gross, right? Like when you go and look, about 50% of people don't wash their hands when they're doing stuff. But the question is why, right? Because the intervention that you'd want to create is different if they don't have a sink on the floor versus if they're just being gross and not washing their hands, right? One's punitive, one's an environmental construct. So when I think about this, I put it in the same realm, right? What's our practice gap? So the same thing that leads me to study hernia technique or bariatric surgery is the same way that I think about culture change and gender equity. We have a practice gap. What's different? What do we have to do to solve it, and how can we do that in a rigorous and sustainable way? And so this is what I alluded to. One, we're looking at this in R1. This is a mixed method study with survey data, qualitative data, and then a localized implementation that would take organizational culture into consideration. And then that is Chelsea Harris. She's a brilliant surgical resident at Maryland, and she was really interested in microaggression as a way to assess real-time culture, because we all know the way that we assess culture is yearly or in one of those culture surveys, or you guys fill those out every year, the climate and culture survey, and then you get static data, and you found out 10 years ago somebody sexually harassed somebody, but there's nothing that you can do about it. So this is what that's meant to do, is kind of understand real-time data and hotspot areas of issue so that you can go and write a plan. That'll hopefully go into June. And then finally, we talked a lot about achievement and leadership. We have a lot of leadership development programs, early faculty exchanges, mini sabbaticals, and and very intentional academic promotion planning where each of our new faculty is given what's called a launch team, which are members of established faculty that meet with them regularly to get them to where they need to be. And so while I don't have kind of take-home lessons for you or concrete things, I do have some take-home thoughts that if you just walk away from today, I think would be useful. So when you get applicants to your group practice who are similar, so they look the same on paper, how do you decide? How do you decide who to hire and who to not hire? What are the metrics that are you using there? Does the messaging from your practice group encourage diverse applicants to even apply or select your organization, people who are a little bit different from you? And when you have leadership positions or committee memberships or administrative positions open, how do you nominate for those positions, and how do you select people for those positions? And so with those final thoughts, I'll say thank you, and I think I left a good 15 minutes for questions, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have. So thank you so much.
And I just want to make a quick announcement that we now have these overhead mics working, so I don't need to run around with the microphone anymore.
Hi, that's incredibly interesting. Thank you. Yeah, one thing that I noticed is a lot of what the outcome, we're a little less hierarchical than a university and somewhat smaller. But, so when a female is doing your work in the hospital, the biggest issue that I see is the environment, how they interact, and not so much the colleagues. And the idea, if you come to a hospital like this, of talking to the support staff and trying to increase awareness. Now, maybe that creates a problem, I don't know. But what are your thoughts on dealing with the environment?
Oh, we have the same problem. So when you look at the interaction between surgeon and non-clinical staff, whether it's OR techs or scrub nurses, it's probably where we have some of our biggest issues, which is the expectations, interactions, the way people are perceived I could give a million anecdotes on that. And that's one of the things we're actually studying right now in our own university, kind of broadly, which is what are those triggers to getting written up, and are there things we can do, like create town halls with data? How can we create a culture not just between colleagues, but between, you know, the ancillary staff, advanced practice providers, OR techs, nursing, and all of those things to gather and gain respect. But a lot of that drills down from the top and how people see people, respect it. You know, I would say I have no issues with my colleagues at Michigan, and I love my partners, and my department's phenomenal, and we're doing all of these really wonderful initiatives. And when you look at my department, we have 0 section heads that are women, 0 division chiefs that are women. Why is that, right? We have completely talented women that are doing that, and that's part of the hierarchy, and I'm sure as people start moving out or retiring and moving, that'll change. But a lot of times it takes some deep introspection to take a look and say, you know, okay, well, we feel this way, but is our group representative of that, and is this really what we're showing, and what is our leadership looking, and what is this stuff? Because we found a lot of problems when we thought that we didn't even have problems. So there are environment issues, but the environment stems from the culture, and my firm belief is as you change the culture, and as people start seeing differences, and it's not tolerated to have those interactions, those things eventually change. Don't have a great answer yet, but we hope to.
Dr. Telem, I'll comment. Fantastic talk. I don't mean to burst any bubble, but I'm the last person in my group you'd probably ask about sports, maybe just like you, but I did read a recent article that relative to your NFL comment, of the 6 or 7 NFL coaches that were fired this year, 6 of them were black.
Yeah.
So we've got a ways to go.
That's new. We do. We do have a ways to go. But, you know, we recruited this woman, Gifty Kawaki. She's incredible. And she was a colorectal fellow at Brigham. And she came to Michigan because we kept telling her to come to Michigan. And she didn't think that she would take that job. She's like, you know, no one there is going to be like me, and no one there is going to support me, because she's so funny. She'll get up and she'll be like, you know, I have an accent. I'm from a different country. She comes from Ethiopia. She goes, I'm short, I'm chubby, and I'm a woman, and all these things. She just announced that at I feel comfortable saying that she just announced that at our faculty retreat. And she said that she was blown away by that interview process, and she felt that she had a place with us, and that's someone that we would have never been able to recruit. She has been such a fantastic addition to our faculty. So while maybe not long-term sustainability in the NFL, I think it does have at least a place with us at Michigan, and it's something that's scalable and transferable. And I think it really brings in a different candidate pool than you would have considered otherwise.
Well, I think that, you know, I'm certainly guilty. I mean, I don't think that if you button your pants around your knees and show me your underwear that you're a CEO and exhibiting leadership. And if you're covered from head to toe in tattoos, I don't think that necessarily is a sign of brilliance. So I've definitely got it.
Yeah.
But, you know, in your comments about looking at the difference between men and women, I think everything you say is absolutely true. But then I'm like, well, is it okay to celebrate differences beyond anatomy between men and women? Or, you know, do we need to be identical?
I don't think you want anybody to be identical, because when people are identical, whether and have the same belief systems and have the same of everything, you lose that competitive edge that comes from diversity. I think what we have to do is be open to different phenotypes of success and be open to kind of just continually looking at the process to make sure that we're promoting everybody in the same way. You know, everybody's like, oh, because the backlash from this is, let's say when I got an associate chair position, everybody was like, oh, Dana got the associate chair position because they're giving positions away to women. I'm like, no, I got it because I worked really hard, and I'm NIH funded, and I've hit every single metric that you could have to do this, but it was still dealing with that backlash of, oh, she just got it because she's a woman, and again, having to kind of prove yourself and promote. And maybe that's not the issue here, but it's been the issue across academia, is justifying once you get these positions. And so the worst thing you can do is promote somebody to a leadership position who's not ready for that leadership position, because if they fail, then it's kind of an endorsement not just on them, but on that process. But what we can do is make sure everybody has equal opportunity to get those positions, and then you select the right person. And if that person's a white male, that person's a white male. Like, I don't care who it is. You just want everybody to feel that they have equal opportunity.
Thanks for coming to speak with us today. This is fantastic. This is particularly relevant for cardiology because the data suggests that we do even worse than surgeons do. We are the worst. Yeah, we are the worst. We are the worst area of any area in medicine in terms of gender and minority disparities. The American College of Cardiology is starting to pay close attention to this, and Pam Douglas is leading work to try and address this. So I encourage you to reach out to her. I know others at the University of Colorado, Stacey Doherty and Ed Havernick, who've done a lot about implicit bias.
Yeah.
There's a huge opportunity, and you talked about the importance of diversity in moving forward. There's also a talent gap that happens as a result of essentially neglecting half your talent pool. So there's a huge opportunity, and to step out on a limb a little bit as a junior partner, I would say that there is hierarchy within our group just by the fact that I feel like I need to qualify that I'm stepping out on a limb as a junior partner to say this. I don't see any women on our executive committee, and that to me speaks to about what's our group look like. Our group is less than 10% women. What's that about? We need to be open about those issues.
Well, and that's all you can ask from a talk like today, is just to look back and say why. If it's 10% women, because that's the application and that's reflective of what's going on in cardiology, it's fine. But sometimes we find barriers that we didn't realize existed before, and that's why I think having specific metrics for success and asking, well, what does it take to get on that executive committee, and what does it take to become a partner in a group, very explicitly, and looking at that and how those decisions are made are really helpful and very impactful when you're going to get people up. And so thank you for saying that.
Do you have a sense, is the U.S. in a better position than European counterparts or Canada? Or, because to me, if you look at politically, the U.S. seems to be lagging when it comes to looking at women compared to men.
Yes and no. So Europeans and other countries have definitely treated their pregnant women better and definitely have better things for maternity leave. But the ceiling is still there for them also, and particularly in some of the Eastern Bloc countries. We have friends and colleagues across the world have a hard time advancing because there it's very hierarchical, and it's an old school training system where you're registered for a while before you kind of move up. And that could be a very big challenge for women to navigate that system. So in some ways they have it better, but they still have that same ceiling or leadership paths as they're moving through systems.
Back to the sports theme.
Yeah. I should never have brought it up.
It's a different sport, though, but Serena Williams has been certainly a minority in her sport and excelled. And there's a recent Nike commercial where she calls out the challenges that women athletes have had over the years and sort of promotes in a positive way women in sports. And I was just curious, do you think that kind of advertisement is successful in any way in changing culture, or is there any data about that? Or I was just wondering if you had any comments. I don't know if you've seen that.
Well, I went out and bought a pair of Nikes right after it happened. So I think it was impactful from a marketing standpoint. Whether that translates to the local level, that's always a question. So one of the things that I see, and especially when you talk to people, and we do a lot of qualitative interviewing as part of what I do for my research, is people know what they're supposed to be doing. It's not really a knowledge gap. People kind of know about this. It's more, how do they implement it in the local level with culture change? So people will watch that commercial and be like, right on, and this is so great, and I agree, and then go to work, and it's almost like a complete disconnect of this is what we're supposed to be doing, but this is my daily environment. And I think where we need to be right now is talking about those steps to get that philosophy into our daily environment and figuring out what does your culture need. I can't come in here and tell you guys what you guys need. I know Michigan what we need because that's my culture and that's what we've been working on. All I can do is kind of give you best practices, tips and tricks that have worked for us. And if they resonate here, it's great. And also hopefully spark ideas about what can be done better, even in your own areas. So I don't think it'll have the impact on the local level just because there always seems to be this gap between known and what we do. But I love seeing it. Again, I'll buy Nikes every day. My daughter has them now. I'm going to get her Sambas for her soccer, but now she's got Nikes, and so she's in good shape.
Good. Thanks for your talk. The University of Michigan, as you know, has been at the center of some of the affirmative action cases.
Yeah.
Has that been helpful, or has that impaired some of what you're doing? I mean, obviously, that's undergrad. You're in the medical school.
Yeah.
There's some disconnect, but I can't help but imagine it's sparked more conversation than one might otherwise see, were you not at the center of two high-profile cases?
Oh, yeah. It's been contentious on campus. And 2 years ago, I guess because of that, our president of the whole university said we need to focus on that. But the burning platform for us in the department wasn't this kind of like awakening by our chair where he decided that this is what we need to do. To be completely honest and transparent, we had a big efflux of mid-level women from our department that were all leaving because of this cap, because there wasn't where to go. There was a couple high-profile things. They all left for, I guess, better chair jobs and different jobs that looked, well, not a lot of laterality. So if you looked at it on paper, it looked like they were moving for better, but we weren't retaining our really great women. So a lot of us got promoted from junior faculty to double faculty really quickly because of that. But that was kind of an awakening moment where we kind of had to take a step back and say, why are our women leaving? Where are they going and why are they going? Is it really for better opportunity, or is it something that we're doing to not retain the talent that we've hired? And that was the impetus to start this. It wasn't some really great moment that we had. It came out of kind of that deep introspection, that deep look of who we want to be and we are not who we want to be, and how do we get there? And so, yeah, it had a big toll, but even more importantly, the local level had a big toll on us as well.
Maybe a contrary point, but so I'm an older physician, so and I'm a father of daughters and grandfather of granddaughters, so I'll set my own table. When I went to medical school, there were about 40 out of 200, so whatever that is, women in our medical school class. By the mid-'80s to early 90s, there were more women in the medical school class than men. But yet, they didn't pick surgical specialties, they didn't pick cardiology, the women in those classes, and I was I taught them, so, I sort of asked them which direction and why they went. And there's a lot of different work-life balance. I mean, like it or not, women are the only ones that can have children. So, they have children, as I see your picture there. And that's a wonderful thing. And, what would our society do without that role? So how do you balance that role with another role because you want to take more time to do something? So they're probably in our community here, I'm going to go out on a limb, but I suspect there are probably more part-time physician women than there are part-time physician men. And some of the women actually that you would have thought wanted to achieve leadership positions, some clearly do, and we see that happen. Others don't have the interest because they're already balancing their work-life balance such that, I guess in order to be a leader, for example, in our practice, you actually have to do your job and then do something else. And there may not be that desire to do something else. So you think that's because coming out of medical school that, roles are defined? I mean, my wife would tell you this, that, she graduated high school in, probably late 60s, early 70s. As a woman, you either became a nurse or a secretary. You kind of, those are your options. I think what is it? Not Virginia Slims, but we've come a long way, baby. And I certainly would like to, my daughter is a very successful account executive in a business environment. And so, I think that there's a balance, and there are wonderful things about men and women that we have to amplify and not neglect.
So, thank you, and I appreciate you saying that. And I'll address that sort of with 3 points. The first one is that we see these achievement gaps in surgery, which is 50% women, and 40% of surgeons don't have children. So 40% of women surgeons don't have children, so you would assume that these are women that really want to go and move forward, and they're still not achieving at the same level. We looked at that, Reshma Jackson, who's a woman I collaborate with, looked at that, published in New England Journal of Medicine, looking at KO8 awardees to get over that question. You would assume somebody who's getting a career development grant from the NIH is someone who's extraordinarily invested in their career in research and leadership positions. And then when they went through and found like the proportion of women who dropped out or didn't convert to RO1s and boards, they did see imbalance in home life. So spent 8 more hours on duty than the male counterpart. And you can do a lot with 8 hours in a week. So even women who you would argue want these leadership positions are still sort of not kind of getting there. In terms of family and work-life balance, there's no such thing as balance. We reframed it as sort of integration. And what I tell people is you can have it all. Sometimes you just can't have it all at once. And while women want to have children, I think the way that we treat women who want to have children in this country is abhorrent. And, you know, we think 12 weeks maternity leave is going to be, you know, the worst thing in the world. But if somebody hurts their back or gets an emergency surgery or breaks their leg and needs to be out, we don't think twice about it. But there's this perception, this gendered perception that somehow if a woman has a baby that they're on the mommy track or they're on the baby track and that they somehow aren't going to work as hard or they're not going to, you know, have all of the same, be willing to throw in the same effort. And so the way that I think about it is that how do we do it differently? Because people aren't less valuable because they have children. And the counter argument to that is I know many men who want to be home with their kids also but feel pressure from work that they can't say that because that makes them look weak or somehow they want to, you know, leave work a little early so they can take their kids to soccer as well. So how do we create a culture and a community that celebrates parenthood without penalizing women versus men, but also kind of opens things up to leadership positions? And we've done a lot of intentional things at Michigan to do that. One, we collectively decided that although it's leaving money on the table, we're not going to run elective ORs on Saturday. People are going to be with their families. Two, we have early morning meetings. We don't have meetings after 5:30 p.m. at night so that people can go home, you know, to their families. And so there are structural things that you can put in that allow men and women to be present at home, because otherwise what you're doing is you're creating burnout in both genders because you're trying too much to do everything. So I think a lot of that has to do with culture change and the way that we see things and how we're running our practices and figuring out what works on each level. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.